It's 7:30, and I'm all the way live. Oh, tonight is mellow tonight. Same drink I had last week, but tonight it's a little different. Maybe I'm feeling different. I don't know. Um, got a lot to talk about. I'm gonna try to stray away. I'm not gonna just do politics tonight. I'm just I'm sick of where we are. Even though there's some hope, I see a little bit on the. I see a crack of dawn on the horizon. But I want to talk about some other things as well. So, YouTube, where you at, baby? Jennifer, baby, I love you, I love you, I love you. Whoa, sentimental reason, yeah. Everything will be mellow, like a cello of love. First thing Sam might say is, baby, I love you, I love you, I love you. Whoa, for sentimental reason, yeah. Ooh, ooh. Y'all remember that Spinners Live album when Felipe Wynn really made his name for himself? He did his little Al Green. How can you mend this broken man? Yeah. How can a loser ever win? Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I've been listening to some old school music. I've been kind of tripping down memory lane for whatever reason. Um, Getting ready to go to New Orleans. It's been a long time coming. I wanted to be there today. Today was actually Grandparents' Day at my granddaughter's school. She's in first grade, and these online companies, you'll put one date in, but if you don't pay attention after you make your changes, your seat assignment, and blah 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 blah. If you don't watch it, they will switch the date on you. Said all of that to say this. I was supposed to be there on September the 19th so that I could be there on September the 21st for Grandparents' Day. They switched my reservations because I wasn't paying attention to October 19th. So if you're paying attention and you from the city, heads up, I'll be in the city next month around this time. Yeah, yeah. Long time coming. So Janice, we got to get a hold of Ronald. I want him to boil me some seafood. Some of my old people, man. Shout out to my boy Ronald Gillard. Haven't heard from him in a minute. Me and this guy was we go way back, way, way, way back. Uh, Kirk Anthony Bernard was my original J5 accompaniment. Back in the days when I had that high pitched Michael Jackson voice. Um, I think the last song I did like Michael was Ben. I think both our voices changed about the good looking out, Jan. My our voices changed around the same time. What's up, Panky Panky? It's Panky and the brain. Panky and the brain. One is them a genius, the other one is the laboratory mice. The genes have been. So what are we gonna do tonight? Because I don't want to take over this world. Everybody wants to rule this world except me. We need to take over. Hmm. We got so much space invader shit in the heavens. No, no telling what they might rain down on us. You know what I mean? Um, I'll talk about it. I was out cleaning up my yard, and I really went overboard. But then I always do more than I need to do. And this guy is running for a state representative, I guess. He stopped by, and he asked me could he leave me a flyer. He was kind of afraid to talk to me. And when I asked, I said, "Who are you? What are you running for?" And when I looked at him, I said, "Okay." I said, so we started talking, and he asked me a little bit about my background, and when I told him I had a master's in public policy and spent 12 years in D.C., he said, "Well, you overqualified. You need to know. I don't want to run for net." I said, "No, tell you the same thing I told Governor Askew. I could be chief of staff. I can get some programs, make them viable, sustainable, and make them work for all parties concerned. But I have no desire to be the man with my picture on the poster. I wouldn't put myself or my family through that. And to the people that know me, you probably know why. And when Governor Askew asked me why, I said it's not the women that I slept with, it's the ones I chose not to sleep with. One woman told me one time, she said, "If you want some of this, you must be gay." I was like, if that was the only nook in the world, I guess I would be, but no. So, yeah, I guess she thought she had sunshine. Didn't work. She cussed me out. I guess women don't take rejection very well. So anyway, yeah. Guy tells me, he says, "Well, I'm gonna need staff if I get elected." I said, "No, that wasn't an audition for a job. Trust me." I said, "I just want some people in here with some fresh ideas." And we were talking about it. I said, "Yeah, just." He says, "Well, I'm a long shot." I said, "Yeah." Republicans has had a strong hold on the state legislature for a while here in Florida, and it's one of the reasons that I came down. I wanted to help make a difference. I don't want to just talk about it. I want to be about it. But be that whatever it is, as it may. Um, I'm not going to talk too much about the delusional, despicable demagogue tonight. I'm going to talk about politics a little bit because it's what's happening, but I kind of want to talk about some other things because I've been getting a deluge, a plethora, or a lot of um, people coming at me. So I'm gonna kind of put the question out there to you guys, and I'm making a little bit of a PSA as well. So, what time is it? Looks like about 8 past the half. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started. I'm gonna say, "How y'all doing? How you doing? How you doing? How you doing? How you doing?" I'm gonna say good evening, welcome to the show. Before I get started, I'm gonna take me a little drink. I got this whole little sinus thing. I think it's the grass and trees. I have these privacy shrubs on the side and back of my house, and they were more than 8 feet tall. So I wanted to cut them down to a manageable height. And I guess I inhaled so much of that ragweed and grass and this, that, and the other that it really started to affect me. So I've been dealing with this whole little sinus thing, sneezing my head off. And this is not a 1 day job. Um, it's taken me a minute. And I still don't have it where I want it, but it looks a hell of a lot better. So I want to say good evening. Welcome to the show. My name is Hank Batiste. This is OMITDALOGIC. As I always say before I go into the show, I want to say thank you of all the things you could be doing on a Thursday night. You choose to be here with me, helping me break this nonsense down to try to make sense. I always say that shit makes no sense. Hence the name of Mythologic. The fact that you come here week in, week out every Thursday, and some people even turn to me after the show and ask my opinion on this, that, and the other, I'm truly honored that you put your trust in me. And for that reason, we're past the 3 year mark now in doing this. And when I look at some of the early shows, um, Warner Brothers has confiscated a lot of my early shows because I used Charles Wright and the E Street Band Express Yourself as my theme song in the beginning. That song has a particular meaning with me. I was at Phyllis Wheatley probably in sixth grade when I first heard the song. Alan Toussaint had a recording studio right across the street on Dumaine, and we would hit his music sometime when the musicians would come by. And it made me want to play music. And one of the things that made me want to play music was when I heard that boom, 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 boom. It's not what you look like when you're doing what you're doing. It's what you're doing when you're doing it. What you look like you're doing. Express yourself. So yeah, that got me. And because I used it, of course I don't have the rights to the song. I I didn't think it would be that radical, but I tried writing in the comment section that I didn't have the rights to the song and blah 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 blah. One of the brothers took a hard stance and confiscated a couple of my um, videos from the early days. But jokes on them. Those shows were kind of hard to watch. I was very nervous. I was getting my feet under me. I was basically reading from a script instead of just having talking points. So I think I've progressed. I think I've evolved. I think I take a more personal effect with what we're doing now. And the fact that you guys are here, come on in, throw me some kisses, give me some thumbs up, show brother love, you know what I mean? And we get this party started. I always talk about this humbling me, and then I always tell you about the voices in my head. I've always been I've always been sociable. So when I'm out in public, I'm one person, but then I crave my solitude. It gives me a chance to reflect and talk to the voices in my head. And sometimes they're actually in agreement. Tonight, the voices in my head are befuddled by McCarthy's claim. The Ukrainian president, Zelensky, is in the U.S. He addressed the UN, United Nations, and then he wanted to address a joint session of Congress. And McCarthy had the audacity to tell him, we're just too busy, we don't have time. Um, then he tried to flip this Trump script and make it about this little influx of people coming across the border, the southern border. And on top of that, he sent his people home. Now, if you've been watching any kind of TV, if you know anything about politics, we're about 9 days from the government shutting down, which means if you get any kind of assistance, if you will, be it um, Medicaid, Medicare, EBT, Social Security, for the veterans that get all of that will come to a screeching halt if Congress doesn't sign some type of bill. September is the end of the government's fiscal year. So as we move into October, they're supposed to have a new budget and bill signed to basically finance all government programs and what have you. Everything for the upcoming year from, you know, um, like I say, Social Security, veterans, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Everything that has a government stamp on it. So if that doesn't happen in the next 9 days, we're going to renege on our bills. And it's not just like we just pay a late fee and it just, A, it doesn't look good. But on top of what he said to Zelensky, we don't have time, he dismissed the members of the House to go home on a Thursday for the weekend. with this deadline looming. On top of that, they were talking about a $9 billion bill for aid for Ukraine to fight Russia. Now, since President Zelensky was here, Putin did what Putin does. He's kind of like Trump, to put himself on the news, he went ahead and he did an offensive and attacked certain parts of the Ukraine while Zelensky was out of the country. I have mixed emotions, I have to say. Last week, I kind of explained to you our history lesson. We talked about two things. First thing we talked about was this 1961 pact, a treaty between what was then the USSR, North Korea, and China. Um, I guess after the Korean War and the fact that we were probably 10 years out of the Second World War, and America had this nuclear arsenal, these other big countries wanted to make sure that they were equally as strong. Hence, it started the Cold War, and I guess which was once a partnership between Russia and the United States fighting Germany during the Second World War. It became an adversarial relationship in the Cold War with the missiles of October and all of that. Russia tried to exert its own influence of communism around the world. So North Korea and China has been backing Russia. The UN, the EU, the European Union, and the United States have been backing the Ukraine. In the last couple of days, I've heard people reiterate the things that I've been saying. One, the fact that Putin has been doing what he's been doing, he's been trying to reassemble all of those countries that used to be part of the USSR and now have their own government, be it democratic or otherwise. So that's the reason for the Ukrainian war. On the other hand, every time something happens around the world, we wind up writing the biggest check. Now, Queen Elizabeth, Queen Mom just died not too long ago. And England is still holding on to a lot of countries, but they don't ante up the way America does. Even though all of this aggression is at their doorstep, being a part of Europe. If you watch anything from Hogan's Heroes to, some of the John Wayne movies and the Lee Harvey movies the Lee, I can't remember his name, talking about the Second World War, you remember that England was actually occupied during the Second World War. So that being said, I think they have more to lose. Therefore, I think they should be stepping up a little bit more. We're fighting here on this front. And the second thing that I've heard people talk about is what I call this isolation theory. One of the things that led up to the Second War becoming, in the Second World War, the countries in Europe went crazy, and we had this, what we call this time of good feelings. The economy was bustling here. So we was like, it's not our problem, it's a European problem. And pretty soon, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, and we were drawn into the war. So we ignored some things, we isolated ourselves, and there's a chance that it could happen again. So when you hear somebody talk about the isolation theory, the things that led to the Second World War, that's what they're talking about. It's enough of that foolishness. And I say foolishness only because we've been bombarded with it to a point where Ukraine has been in this war for, I guess, 18 months, going on 2 years or something to that effect. And they've been back and forth. And one thing they said, even if they don't get aid from America, they're still going to fight. And I think it's admirable. Um, they're fighting for something that we take for granted. That's all I'm going to say about that. So they want a $24 billion funding from America. It is what it is. Then we hear about the actors, the writers, and the United Auto Workers all being on strike. I understand what they want. When I worked for a company, and I was the CEO of a county health center in Tuskegee, and as a CEO, I had this little bonus because it's not like the bonuses that CEOs of you know IBM and Fox and places like this um, have. But I forego part of the bonus because I wanted to keep the center open. So I felt like I was doing an admirable thing. Um, Consequently, in most companies, there's probably a 400 to 800% difference between line workers or labor and what the CEO makes. When a lot of these companies, like, and I'll just say Chrysler, they're no longer Chrysler, um, Ford, Chevrolet, GMC, since their company traded, I mean, publicly traded, since 2008, when Obama stepped in and he gave all of this money to the auto industry to keep them from going open, going under. All of that information is public information now. We can see what the CEO makes, we can see what the profit margin is, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So now the unions have come together and say it's time for us to get a bigger slice of the pie. They made some concessions to keep the companies open and viable and keep their jobs back in 2008 when we had that so-called recession. I call it a mini depression. So now that they gave up something, they want the upper management and the shareholders to give up something. I understand where they come from, so I don't have an opinion about it. I don't plan on buying a car no time soon. We got three vehicles that are on drive. So last thing I want to talk about, and I'm just mentioning this up front, is this thing came up on my news feed from back in, I guess it was about 10 years ago. In 2013, I moved back to New Orleans to help open a community hospital. And while I was there, I took advantage of all of the things I hadn't had, daiquiris and po' boy sandwiches and these little gas stations that make these amazing hot meals and so forth and so on. And a couple places to hang out and, fish plates on Friday and you name it. You know what I mean? And when some of this stuff came up on my news feed, it made me feel nostalgic. It made me miss New Orleans. And some people from high school start talking about how they missed it too, because a lot of them moved after Katrina. When Katrina displaced a lot of native New Orleanians, they started living other places and they started to see some of the things that I saw. I'm always be a New Orleanian at heart. And no matter where I go, I'm going to take that slice of New Orleans with me. But it's not like the fresh seafood you that good old oil spill in the Gulf. And I make jokes about it, but there's a certain taste of the seafood that comes from those bayous. You know what I mean? There's a certain thing with the D&D sausage and the daiquiris, and I don't drink sweet drinks. You see, I drink bourbon straight up, usually two fingers neat, which means without ice, without any mixture. So my dad used to say, if you got to water it down, you shouldn't be drinking it to begin with. But daiquiris is a New Orleans staple, and I miss it. I miss being able to get me a half and half, a half shrimp and a half oyster po' boy, 18 inches long, and then going out on the lakefront and watching the boats and the sun go down and, just people watch a little bit and people riding on bikes, a few girls running with the little shorts and going to City Park. You understand? I miss that. And then I think about what's happening now, the killing, the fact that the city has been taken over. So this gentrification, the areas I used to live in. One of the reasons I don't really like going home, my mom and my older sister and brother are no more. They're not here anymore. Um, I've got one sister left who lives now in Baton Rouge. I've got kids that's in New Orleans, but I don't know where anybody lives anymore. Most of the people I knew lived in the same house from probably half of them from the 60s up to the 80s when I moved away. So no matter how long I was gone, when I came home, I knew what was going to happen if I headed up Galvez Street. I headed down Claiborne, or I went to parts of the Sixth Ward. I know who I was going to see. I know if I went on Tuntee, I know where Carl Tate's mom lived, and all of these little things that reminded me, but there were no more. So it wasn't my city. And then I start looking at parts of the Sixth Ward down Broad Street, and I saw a bike lane, and I start making jokes. I said, "Ooh, when they put in a bike lane, we can't afford to stay here anymore." Then I went to parts of Carrollton, where my grandmother used to stay on Jeanette Street. And my grandmother, two-bedroom, two-bath house. No, two-bedroom, one-bath. With the three porches that had that mass appeal, the curb appeal. When I drove down Oak Street and up and down Carrollton and Claiborne, and it wasn't the same. And something told me, well, let me look at, because you know how family is. When my grandmother passed, I had an uncle. My mom had two brothers. One lived in Pontchartrain Park, the other one lived in Minneapolis. Everybody was saying, sell the house, let us split it three ways. At the time, I didn't even think about it. I didn't even think about what it meant to keep it in the family. But when I went back to New Orleans, I said, let me look at my grandmother's house and see what it's going for. When they sold this house back in 1983, I think it sold for about $70,000 or $80,000. The same house was on the market in 2013 for $600,000. The neighborhood wasn't as great as it was when my grandmother and grandfather lived there. They added a second bathroom because they had more than enough yard. but I was just besides myself. And then I started to look at some property around the city. And everybody said, man, you too late. You should have bought something right after Katrina. It was giving it away. But then I thought about it. Because right after Katrina, I was living between Tuskegee and Atlanta. And a girlfriend of mine was working for Home Depot, the foundation. And she says, aren't you from New Orleans? I said, yeah. She says, well, we need some people. I said, for what? She says, to go back, we're going to look at cleaning away some of the debris and putting in playgrounds for kids and doing this and doing that. I was like, yo, count me in. And as we went into New Orleans the first time, there's what's called a twin span bridge that goes back and forth to Slidell. One goes east, the other one goes west. The westbound bridge looked like soda crackers laying in milk. And then I got to the city, and it looked like some kid took a paintbrush and just walked down the street. And there was a 6 foot line from where the water stood for over 2 weeks. The line was about 12 inches wide and 6 feet high. Parts of East New Orleans was in total darkness. New Orleans looked like a third world country. Half of NOPD was not there. National Guard was there, riding around in Jeeps and Humvees, and I literally cried. This cannot be my city. Less than one fourth, maybe less than a fifth of the population had returned. And then I looked at all of those people that was living in those cancer trailers of FEMA. And then I look at where the city has come from. And I look at the mayors that we've had and how they've exploited the city. The same way Pelosi and Trump has exploited the country for personal gain. And all they're looking at is revenue. And to hell with those that so they start snatching up property. They start moving people out of the projects into real neighborhoods. I'm gonna say this, it's not politically correct, so that's my disclaimer. I love black folks. I cannot stand niggas. Now niggas ain't black. Niggas can be of any ethnic background. It can be black, white, Puerto Rican, tan, Haitian, yellow. It's a certain mentality. Because some niggas are motivated by greed. Some are motivated by desperation. And then I look at how far the city has come, but that mentality is so ingrained And those parasites that hung around, rather than prey on those newcomers who call themselves urban dwellers or urban pioneers, I say they're just like Columbus. You cannot discover a land that's already inhabited. You can't. There's somebody living there. Those are called inhabitants. So you follow that same formula. Let them have the drugs, put them in a little darkness, and let them erase each other. But we're going to send a clear message. If you mess with the urban dwellers or the urban pioneers, we're going to find out who. But if Pookie kills Ray Ray and Shaniqua and them, you could go on Bourbon Street and shoot 10 people. The first thing they're going to determine is where they're from, where did they live. But if they're new to the city, and heaven forbid, if they're a tourist, I promise you the murder is going to be solved in less than the first 48. Why? Because they know who the numbskulls is. I didn't say numbskulls are. The numbskulls is. They know what niggas are acting niggerish. And they choose when to enforce said laws. And I pray. So all of those little houses that's going for $27,000, $30,000, $40,000, those are the depressed neighborhoods. And as soon as a developer comes in and they grease the palm of somebody in City Hall, and a couple people in the state legislature, they start to buy up blocks, literally blocks of neighborhoods. And they do it under the guise of creating affordable housing. For who? For somebody who's from Massachusetts going to Tulane? Meanwhile, if you're from the city, unless you know somebody, you SOL. So I'm saying this because this is not just a New Orleans thing. See, I remember what it felt like the first time I went to DC. I remember the way it felt the first time I went to Chicago. And it reminded me so much of being at home because there were street musicians. The first time I went to Cook County for a conference right across the street from Cabrini Green Project. And I said, damn, that's what JJ and Thelma, because that was the backdrop for good times. And suddenly I understood what James Amos was talking about. And suddenly I couldn't understand why Norman Lear couldn't understand that it would have been so much more powerful to see all of these shows were a spinoff of All in the Family. All in the Family started, and George and Wheezy. First, there was before there was a George, he had a brother named Henry. And then Maud was Edith's cousin, who had a maid named what? Florida. Now, somehow, when they did the spinoff, Florida was living in the project in Cabrini Greens in Chicago. Maud was living in California. And Archie and Edith, oh, Archie, boy, the way that Miller played, songs that made the hit parade, they stayed in Queens. And George and Wheezy was the only ones that moved up. But Chicago was beautiful. I walked from downtown to the Lincoln Zoo, to the Buckingham Fountains. Huh. I wanted to take the same trick that Preach and Cochise took in my favorite movie of the 70s, Cooley High. And then I remember the first time I went to DC and the first time I went to New York. Before it was Times Square, it was 42nd Avenue. It wasn't a whole lot of glitter. But it reminded me so much of being in the French Quarters. I ain't know much, but I knew pimps and hoes. The first, I'm here 42nd Street, my bad. First time I went to the Bronx, and I actually got to see Yankee Stadium. I went to Staten Island. I was dating this girl, stayed in Jersey City. And I'm driving to a house, and I'm like, oh, snap. That's the Statue of Liberty. She said, yeah. I'm like, you got the Statue of Liberty in your backyard. And I'm like, wow. And the same thing that's happening in New Orleans is happening in Harlem. There will never be another Harlem Renaissance. Forget about it. Parts of Brooklyn. I went to the Bronx for a Yankees game last year. The South Bronx looked like that old movie with Serpico, Apache, Fort Apache Bronx. I watched these four knuckleheads. I said, yo, this robbery waiting to happen. And I saw the cat jogging down the street. I said, oh man. I posted up against the wall, threw my foot up. They jump out the car. They start beating my man. He had an iPhone. Now, I don't know anybody that carries a wallet and $1,000 when they jog, but he had an iPhone and some iPods, AirPods, or whatever you call them. And he made the god awful mistake of saying, but I'm a cop. Nah, bro. They beat him worse. And the last time I was in Chicago, I remember getting off the train and walking to United Center. I remember going to, now, Michael Jordan restaurant was here. 2 doors down was Oprah's restaurant. If you're from Chicago, you know what I'm talking about. Oprah's restaurant, you could walk in and say, let me get that table right there. Michael Jordan's restaurant, you had a 2 hour wait. And most people was buying memorabilia while they waited. And I'm like, yo, this is crazy. For Juanita's mac and cheese, for real? My joint was Bogart's, man. My joint was the first time I went to every year. Radiologic Society of North America had a thing in a conference in Chicago. And me being a director of radiology, Siemens, Picker, Philips, GE, all those folks wine and dine, Kodak, you name it. DuPont, everybody wined and dined. So I ate, that's probably where my behind picked up weight. I ate, I drink on somebody else's dime. And the last time I went there, I was just shaking my head. I said all of that to say this, folks. Douglas, his brother, went to school with me. He told me to stop reminiscing, to deal with things as they are today. And I said, you know what? Our parents didn't. I remember a time when I didn't have to know who your mother and father was. But if you were doing wrong, I corrected you. And you took it on the chin and you said, yes, sir. And you kept it moving. You know what's crazy about that? I have the audacity to do it today. But because I do it, young brothers just assume that I got OG status. So they give me street respect or credit. I ain't OG. No. Don't call me no OG. Oh, my bad, my bad, my bad. First of all, I don't want no gang affiliation. So don't tell me what your set is. I don't need to know none of that. All I'm telling you is step correct because you know what? There's certain places that where all of this bullshit should be off limits. When there's a festival and children are out, the Taste of Chicago, now kids got to be looking over their shoulder. And the first time people come out, now you got gangster disciples and you got vice laws. Now you got Crips and Bloods every damn where. There should be certain places where your bullshit beefs are off limits. And those places are anywhere where families and kids congregate, be it the park, be it the supermarket, be it a school. And if you're a real G, don't let your little niggas be selling no drugs in no school. And if you're an elder, don't be afraid to speak up. Because 9 out of 10 times when you do, there's this little humanity that's left inside of those little knuckleheads. Because sadly, some of them are doing it because Chrysler's on strike. GMC is on strike. So the only ones hiring is Pookie and Ray Ray. But if you say something to them, you remind them that you care about them. And I promise you, they'll be the ones who straighten up the boys. Oh yeah, there's some little knuckleheads out there too. I call them the Walking Dead. Folks, I could go on. I could talk about, I'm tired of talking about Trump. What's going to happen with that? Okay, I just tell you. In some ways, he's trending downward. In other ways, the Dems, silly, are expecting that to turn more people towards Biden. But you can't beat Father Time. So since that's what you want me to talk about, let me tell you this. When I see Mitch McConnell and Joe Biden shuffling along, I say it's time for us to do something. When I see Rupert Murdoch being 92 years old and finally stepping down from Fox News, but then I see his son coming in with that same mentality, I'm saying that's where we come in. And we have strength in numbers. So the only way we're going to turn our neighborhoods back into neighborhoods before they're all gentrified and sold from under us and we can't afford to live there anymore is for us to start acting like elders and reminding these boys, like my mom used to say, they're still a child of God and they're still somebody's child. And if you show them love, you never know what's going to happen. You might be the one that turned them around. So, life, liberty, and the pursuit of property. When you get that thing in the mail saying you got X amount of dollars, if you are so blessed that you have a piece of property with your name on the deed, don't be in so much of a hurry to go out and take a second mortgage or let anybody talk you into borrowing against something that you own. When people come into your house and they want to give you new windows and they give you a price of $14,000, $15,000, $20,000, and you say, I ain't got that kind of money, they said, but you could finance it. The first time you cannot pay that financing or that second mortgage, they're going to put a lien on it. And what you used to owe won't be yours anymore. What you used to own won't be yours anymore. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of property. If you want it, be ready to fight for it. That's all I got for you tonight, folks. Thank you. I appreciate you. I'm honored that you come by to hear me rattle off this bullshit, but this is real. The only thing that makes it bullshit is I'm telling you something you already know. Sometimes we have to be reminded. And other times we have to know that we're not alone. So you and a couple of your friends, take your neighborhood back. Hey, young blood, come here. Let me talk to you for a minute. And it's easy. I hate to say it, but it's easy to talk to these young men than it is these little women, because these little girls are treacherous, and they so flip. I'm done, folks. My name is Hank Batista, so OMITDALOGIC. So do me a favor before you go tonight. Go to my YouTube, OMITDALOGIC. Subscribe, ring the bell, share the show. Diane, bring me, send me a, don't tell me you're getting no, go, just go. She gonna tell me, now I want a seafood po' boy. Oh, that's what made me go to Bucky's the other night. Go to my YouTube, OMITDALOGIC, OMITDALOGIC. I'll have to go find me some French bread and make my own po' boy sandwich. Oh, I'm so jealous, but I'll get mine next month now. Subscribe. Set tonight's show. And as I always say, don't be so afraid to die that you forget to live for purpose. Because the one thing about this thing called life, this game called life, nobody leaves alive. So make that dash, make it work for something. Make it worth something. And if you do that, meet me here next week. Same Baptiste place, same Baptiste time. And as always, important, I wish you love. I wish you peace, two fingers to the sky. And like your man, Gregory, I'm out here. Good night, folks. Good night, all. Hey, Chish, you are telling the truth. What's up, cuz? Good evening. I'm listening. You better be listening. I'll be in New Orleans. Where you at now? Where you living at? Where you living at? Where you living? Yeah, October 19th. We're gonna have to get something. I might have to show up with some of your peoples, some of our classmates. We're gonna hand pick them because I don't want no foolishness. Man, look, I love y'all to death. This one's for you. Smooth. We got to get our neighborhoods back. Otherwise, our children ain't gonna have nowhere to live. And it is what it is. See y'all, folks. Much love. I talk too much tonight.